Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at something you flagged in your submission.
Oh,
That whole imposter syndrome thing,
yeah.
especially in tech, you know?
Yeah,
You've all heard about it.
for sure, for sure.
But the article you sent,
Mhm.
why the imposter syndrome narrative might be harmful,
Yeah.
that has me thinking twice about whether it's always helpful to focus on it, you know?
It's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome, that feeling of not being good enough,
Right.
like you're going to be found out as a fraud,
Huh?
even if you're successful, is definitely real and it can be crippling.
Yeah.
But the article makes a good point
Yeah.
that constantly dwelling on it might actually make it harder to grow and learn,
Yeah.
especially in a fast-paced field like coding.
Yeah. That's what really caught my eye.
Okay.
So before we kind of dive into the potential downsides,
Mhm.
let's quickly level set.
Yeah.
The article describes imposter syndrome in tech as feeling like your coding skills are never quite enough,
Yeah.
always comparing yourself to others,
Right.
feeling inadequate, even if
Yeah.
you're actually doing well.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with your experience at all?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tech, especially coding, is constantly evolving.
Right.
There's always something new to learn.
Yeah.
Someone seemingly ahead of you.
Uh-huh.
It's easy to fall into that trap of thinking you're not good enough,
Right.
especially when you're starting out or tackling a new challenge.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a breeding ground for self-doubt.
For sure.
But this article argues that overemphasizing imposter syndrome
Okay.
can actually do more harm than good.
Right.
One of the points that really jumped out at me
Mhm.
is this idea of it becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy,
Yes.
you know.
It's like the article says, if you're always expecting to feel like an imposter,
Right.
you start seeing every challenge as confirmation of your inadequacy.
Mhm.
You might even avoid taking on new projects or learning new skills because you're afraid of failing,
Right.
afraid of being exposed.
So instead of pushing ourselves to grow, we end up staying stuck in our comfort zone,
Exactly.
almost making the imposter syndrome come true.
Exactly. The article uses a code analogy
Okay.
that really brings this point home.
Right.
It's like this. Imagine a program
Uh-huh.
where if you feel inadequate,
Right.
the default action is to assume you have imposter syndrome
Yeah.
and avoid anything challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But the alternative would be to question why you're not feeling like an imposter,
Right.
which is equally unhelpful.
Right.
Either way, it keeps you from tackling the real issue.
That's a really powerful way to visualize it. It's
Yeah.
like we get caught in this loop of self-doubt that keeps us from actually getting better.
For sure.
I'm already starting to see how this focus on imposter syndrome could backfire even if the intention is good.
And that's just one of the potential harms the article highlights.
Right.
Another one that I think is particularly relevant in tech
Mm-hmm.
is that focusing on imposter syndrome can mask genuine skill gaps.
Can you unpack that a bit more for me? How
Yeah.
does that work?
Well, if every time we feel uncertain
Right.
or struggle with a coding problem,
Uh-huh.
we just chalk it up to imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
we might miss opportunities to actually improve our skills.
Hmm.
It's like saying,
Or-
oh, it's just imposter syndrome. Everyone feels this way.
Yeah.
Instead of saying,
Okay.
okay, maybe I need to brush up on this particular concept, or maybe I need to practice this type of problem solving more.
So it's like using imposter syndrome as a catch-all excuse,
Precisely.
instead of digging deeper to understand where we genuinely need to grow.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The article makes this point using another code comparison.
Okay.
Imagine a function
Right.
that assesses your coding skills.
Uh-huh.
If you feel uncertain, it just spits out, it's just imposter syndrome.
Right.
But a more helpful function
Yeah.
would identify your strengths,
Uh-huh.
recognize areas for improvement,
Yeah.
and create a plan for continuous growth.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Instead of dismissing our doubts, we need to be honest with ourselves and figure out what steps we can take to actually get better.
Absolutely.
Right.
And the goal isn't to become perfect
Right.
or to never feel any uncertainty.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we're all on a learning journey
Yeah.
and that there's always room for growth.
This is really making me rethink how I approach challenges, even outside of tech.
Yeah.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of blaming everything on imposter syndrome instead of looking for concrete ways to improve.
It's a common trap
Yeah.
and one that the article encourages us to break free from.
Yeah.
And it's not just about individual growth either.
Mm-hmm.
It impacts how we interact with others in the tech community.
You're referring to the article's point about how this everyone feels this way mentality
Yes.
can actually discourage people from seeking help.
Yes.
Right.
In a field as collaborative as coding,
Yeah.
asking for help should be seen as a strength, not a weakness.
Absolutely.
But if we're all walking around thinking we're imposters,
Right.
we might be less likely to reach out for support,
Mm-hmm.
fearing it'll expose our perceived inadequacy.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's like we create this culture of silence where everyone is struggling on their own
Exactly.
because they're too afraid to admit they need help.
Exactly. And that can be especially detrimental in tech,
Right.
where mentorship and collaboration are so crucial for learning and growth.
The article uses another code example to illustrate this point.
Yeah.
It compares two scenarios.
Mhm.
One where you suffer in silence if you're stuck on a problem because of imposter syndrome,
Right.
and another where you actively seek help and learn from the experience.
It's a stark contrast.
Yeah.
And it highlights the missed opportunities that can occur when we let imposter syndrome hold us back from connecting with others.
This is all making me realize that imposter syndrome, while a valid feeling, can become a real barrier to growth if we let it dominate our thinking.
Yeah.
It's almost like it creates this negative feedback loop
Right.
where we avoid challenges, hesitate to ask for help,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately limit our own learning potential.
That's a really insightful observation.
Yeah.
And it leads us to the fourth harm the article outlines.
Okay.
The focus on imposter syndrome can overshadow the importance of continuous learning,
Right.
which is absolutely vital in the ever-evolving world of tech.
So it's like we're so worried about feeling like an imposter
Right.
that we forget to actually focus on getting better.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The article argues that the imposter syndrome narrative
Okay.
can create this false expectation
Mhm.
that there's some magical point
Right.
where we'll suddenly feel completely competent and confident,
Right.
and then we won't have to worry about learning anymore.
Yeah.
But that's just not realistic,
No.
especially in tech.
I completely agree. It's a field that demands constant learning and adaptation. There's always something new to explore,
Yeah.
some new challenge to tackle.
Right. And the article uses a really clever code analogy to illustrate this.
Okay.
It contrasts two approaches to learning a new concept.
Uh-huh.
One is driven by fear and doubt,
Right.
leading to procrastination and avoidance.
Right.
The other embraces learning as an ongoing process, regardless of how you feel in the moment.
So it's about shifting our focus from feeling confident to simply being curious and engaged in the learning process itself.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that even experienced developers are constantly learning,
Right.
and that uncertainty is a natural part of working with complex technologies.
This is all really resonating with me.
Yeah.
It's like the imposter syndrome narrative, while maybe well-intentioned, can actually create this negative mindset that hinders our growth.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a paradox.
It is a paradox,
Yeah.
and one that the article challenges us to confront.
Uh-huh.
It's not about denying the existence of imposter syndrome,
Right.
but rather about exploring alternative narratives that are more empowering and conducive to growth.
Okay, I'm really intrigued by this idea of alternative narratives.
Yeah.
If constantly dwelling on imposter syndrome isn't the answer,
Right.
what does the article propose as a better way forward?
Okay.
What are some of these alternative narratives it suggests?
Yeah. The article highlights 4 key shifts in perspective that I think you'll find really helpful,
Okay.
especially as you continue your journey in tech.
I'm all ears.
Okay.
I'm ready for some actionable advice.
The first shift is all about embracing what's called a growth mindset.
The growth mindset. I've
Yeah.
heard that term thrown around.
Yeah.
It's about believing that your abilities aren't fixed,
Exactly.
that you can get better through effort and learning. Right.
Exactly. Instead of seeing challenges as proof that we're not good enough,
Right.
we need to start viewing them as opportunities to learn and grow.
Yeah.
The article emphasizes that this is especially important in a field like tech, where things are constantly changing,
Yeah.
and there's always something new to learn.
That's a really powerful reframing.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do that?
Right.
How do we move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, especially when it comes to coding?
Right.
The article you submitted mentioned that you're trying to learn Python right now.
Yeah.
I bet this mindset shift could make a huge difference for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The article offers several practical suggestions,
Okay.
and they all revolve around focusing on the process of learning and skill development
Uh-huh.
rather than just the end result.
Okay.
So instead of getting caught up in whether you're good at coding,
Right.
Focus on the steps you're taking to get better.
Yeah.
Celebrate the small wins,
Okay.
like figuring out a tricky bit of syntax
Uh-huh.
or successfully running your first program.
I like that.
Yeah,
Process over outcome.
exactly.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
For sure.
I can see how that could take some of the pressure off and make the learning process more enjoyable.
Exactly. And speaking of process,
Okay.
the article uses this code analogy
Hmm.
to show how we can approach challenges with a growth mindset.
Okay.
Imagine a function called approach challenge.
Right.
Instead of defaulting to fear or avoidance,
Mm-hmm.
this function would first view the challenge as a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Then it would break the challenge down
Okay.
into smaller, more manageable tasks, allowing you to learn and apply new skills along the way.
Right.
Finally, it would prompt you to reflect on how much you've grown through the process.
So it's not about pretending challenges aren't tough,
Right.
but about changing how we think about them and
Yeah.
using them as fuel for growth.
Exactly.
I love that. What else does the article suggest when it comes to embracing a growth mindset?
Well, it also talks about the importance of reframing mistakes.
Okay.
Instead of seeing them as failures,
Yeah,
we should view them as valuable learning experiences.
that's so important.
Yeah.
I think especially in coding,
Uh-huh.
it's easy to get discouraged by errors,
Yeah.
but debugging is such a huge part of the process.
Right.
I remember when I first started learning HTML,
Yeah.
I would get so frustrated with those little syntax errors.
Yeah, for sure.
But then I realized that debugging was actually helping me understand the code better
Right.
and making me a more careful coder in the long run.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Errors are inevitable,
Uh-huh.
but they're also opportunities to learn and improve.
Right.
The more we can embrace that,
Mm-hmm.
the more resilient and persistent we'll become as learners.
Okay.
So the first shift is all about cultivating that growth mindset.
Okay.
The second shift the article highlights is about focusing on skill development
Okay.
and setting concrete goals.
Okay. So it's not just about changing our mindset,
Right.
but also about taking concrete actions to improve our skills.
Exactly.
What does that look like in practice,
Oh, wow.
especially for someone learning to code?
It's about shifting our focus from vague feelings of adequacy
Okay.
to tangible, measurable progress.
Okay.
Instead of worrying about whether you're good enough,
Right.
focus on specific skills you want to develop.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to master a particular programming language
Yeah.
or learn how to build a certain type of application.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Having clear goals and a way to track our progress can be really motivating, especially when we're feeling discouraged.
for sure.
It's like setting fitness goals. You're more likely to stick with it if you have a specific target in mind
Exactly.
and a way to measure your progress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the article provides a really helpful way to visualize this approach.
Okay.
Imagine a code class called Skill Development Plan.
Okay.
This class would allow you to define your goals,
Uh-huh.
track your progress in different skills,
Okay.
and regularly review how you're doing.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It's about being proactive and intentional about our development, rather than just drifting along and hoping for the best.
Exactly.
So we've talked about embracing a growth mindset
Mhm.
and focusing on skill development.
Right.
What's the third shift the article proposes?
The third shift is all about normalizing seeking help
Okay.
and collaboration.
Okay.
This goes back to what we were discussing earlier
Yeah.
about how the fear of being exposed as an imposter
Right.
can prevent us from reaching out for support.
Yes. I can definitely see how that would be a barrier.
Yeah.
But the article argues that we need to create a culture
Right.
where asking for help is seen as a strength,
Yes.
not a weakness.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's about recognizing that even the most experienced developers
Yeah.
rely on collaboration and mentorship to solve problems and learn new things.
Right.
No one has all the answers.
Right.
And there's no shame in admitting you need help.
I think sometimes we get caught up in this idea of the lone genius coder
For sure.
working in isolation
Yeah.
and effortlessly churning out brilliant code. Yeah.
But the reality is that most groundbreaking work happens in teams.
For sure.
It's about leveraging each other's strengths
Right.
and learning from each other's experiences.
Exactly. And the article uses another code example
Okay.
to illustrate how we can approach problem solving
Uh-huh.
in a more collaborative way.
Yep.
Imagine a function called tackle complex problem.
Hmm.
This function would encourage you to first try solving the problem independently,
Cool.
using your own skills and resources.
Uh-huh.
But if you get stuck,
Right.
it would prompt you to reach out to your peers,
Okay.
consult documentation,
Mhm.
or even ask a mentor for guidance.
Right.
The key is to view seeking help as a natural part of the process,
Yeah,
not a sign of defeat.
that makes so much sense.
Yeah,
It's about striking that balance between independence and collaboration.
right.
I love how these code analogies make these concepts so clear and relatable, even for
Yeah.
someone like me who's not a programmer.
I think they're really effective.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered embracing a growth mindset,
Uh-huh.
focusing on skill development,
Mm,
and normalizing help seeking.
right.
What's the fourth and final shift the article proposes?
I'm eager to hear it.
Okay.
This is all really giving me a new perspective on how to approach learning and growth.
The fourth and final shift is about emphasizing the ongoing nature of learning in tech.
Okay.
This builds on what we were talking about earlier
Huh.
about how there's no finish line in this field.
That's so true. It's about recognizing that we're never really done learning in this field.
Exactly.
Right.
The article encourages us to view learning as an inherent part of a tech career,
Okay.
not just something we do at the beginning.
Right.
It's about staying curious,
Yeah.
exploring new technologies, and being comfortable with the fact that there will always be things we don't know.
It's like that famous quote,
Yeah,
the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing.
I love that quote.
Yeah.
It perfectly captures the spirit of what the article is advocating for.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the beauty of a career in tech.
Mm-hmm.
There's always something new to discover,
Yeah.
some new challenge to tackle,
Yeah.
some new skill to master.
So it's not about reaching some mythical point of a perfect knowledge,
Right.
but rather about embracing the journey of continuous learning and growth.
Exactly.
I think that's a really empowering way to think about it.
I do too.
Yeah.
And the article provides a really elegant way to represent this idea
Great.
of a tech professional who is constantly evolving.
Okay.
Imagine a code class called Tech Professional.
Mm-hmm.
This class would have properties for skills and experiences,
Okay.
and it would include functions for learning new technologies,
Uh-huh.
gaining experience from projects,
Yeah.
and reflecting on lessons learned.
Right.
The key is that this class is designed for continuous growth. The learning never stops.
That's a cool way to visualize it. It's
Yeah.
like our skills and experiences are constantly expanding and evolving.
Right.
But the core of who we are as tech professionals remains focused on learning and growth.
Precisely. And it's a much more realistic and I think inspiring
Yeah.
way to think about a career in tech.
This is all really insightful.
Yeah.
But I know you, our listener, are probably wondering,
Uh-huh.
what can I actually do to overcome self-doubt
Yeah.
when it pops up?
Yeah.
Especially when I'm learning to code
Hmm.
or prepping for those tough tech interviews.
Right.
The good news is the article offers some really practical strategies that you can start using today.
Absolutely. Let's dive into those strategies. I think you'll find them surprisingly simple, yet incredibly effective.
I'm ready to hear about these strategies.
Yeah.
I have a feeling they'll be helpful not just for coding, but for tackling any kind of challenge where self-doubt creeps in.
I think you'll be surprised how versatile these strategies are. The first one the article suggests is to keep what it calls a success journal.
A success journal. I like the sound of that already. What exactly does that entail?
It's pretty simple, really. The idea is to regularly document your coding achievements, no matter how small they seem. Did you finally solve that bug that's been driving you crazy? Did you grasp a new concept that you were struggling with before? Write it down.
So it's like creating a tangible record of our progress, something we can look back on when we're feeling discouraged or doubting our abilities.
Exactly. It's easy to focus on the things we haven't accomplished yet, the mistakes we've made, the areas where we feel inadequate. But a success journal helps us shift our perspective and celebrate the wins, no matter how small. It's like building a portfolio of evidence to combat those negative thoughts.
I love that. It's like giving ourselves a pat on the back for all the hard work we're putting in. The article even provides a code example for how we could structure a success journal digitally right.
It does. Imagine a code class called Success Journal. This class would allow you to create entries for each achievement, including the date and a description of what you accomplished. You could even add functionality to review your progress over specific time periods to see how far you've come.
That's so cool. It's like having a digital cheerleader always there to remind us of how much we're capable of. What's the second strategy the article recommends?
The second strategy is all about breaking down complex problems into smaller, more manageable steps. This is a classic problem-solving technique that applies to so many areas of life, but it's especially helpful in coding.
I can definitely see why coding challenges can be incredibly intimidating, especially during technical interviews. It's easy to get overwhelmed by the complexity and feel like you're in over your head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you break that big, scary problem down into smaller, more digestible pieces, it suddenly feels a lot more approachable. The article compares it to eating an elephant. You do it one bite at a time.
I love that analogy. So instead of staring at the whole elephant, we focus on taking that first bite, then the next and the next, until eventually we've tackled the entire thing.
Exactly. And the article even provides a code example to illustrate how we can apply this approach to coding. Imagine a function called solve large algorithmic problem. This function would first break the problem down into smaller subproblems, then solve each subproblem individually, celebrating progress along the way, and finally combine the solutions into a cohesive whole.
I love that it includes the reminder to celebrate progress. It's so important to acknowledge those small victories along the way. It keeps us motivated and reinforces that feeling of accomplishment. Okay, so break down those big, scary problems into bite-sized pieces. Got it. What's the third strategy the article recommends?
The third strategy is to engage in what's called deliberate practice. This is about moving beyond just passive learning or coding for the sake of coding and really focusing on targeted skill improvement.
Okay, tell me more about what that means in the context of coding. I'm intrigued.
It's about being intentional and strategic with your learning. Identify specific areas where you want to get better, whether it's a particular programming language, a certain type of algorithm, or a specific coding technique. Then create a structured practice plan with clear objectives and track your progress as you go.
So it's not just about the quantity of time you spend coding, but the quality of that time and how focused it is on improving specific skills.
Exactly. It's about making every minute count. The article even provides a code example for how you could structure your deliberate practice. Imagine a class called Deliberate Practice. This class would allow you to define the skill you want to work on, create a set of exercises targeted at that skill, and track your performance as you complete those exercises. You could then analyze your progress and identify areas where you need more practice.
That's brilliant. It's like having a personalized training regimen for our coding skills. I love how this article uses code analogies to make these concepts so clear and accessible. What's the fourth and final strategy the article recommends? I'm already feeling so much more empowered just hearing about these strategies.
I'm glad to hear that. The fourth strategy is one that you might find particularly valuable, given your interest in learning Python and getting more involved in the tech community. It's to contribute to open source projects.
Ah, that's a great one. I've heard so much about the benefits of contributing to open source. It's a fantastic way to gain real-world experience, build your portfolio, and connect with other developers, right?
It is, and it can be a huge confidence booster too. When you contribute to an open source project, you're working on something that people are actually using, which can be incredibly motivating. You're also getting feedback on your code from other developers, which can help you improve your skills and learn from your mistakes in a supportive environment.
It's like a real-world boot camp for your coding skills, but with a built-in support system.
hmm
And you're getting that valuable experience of collaborating with others, which we already talked about how important that is. I'm definitely going to add contribute to open source to my to-do list.
I highly recommend it. And don't worry if you're feeling intimidated. You don't have to be a coding expert to get involved. The article emphasizes the importance of starting small. Look for projects that have good first issue or beginner-friendly tags. These are tasks that are specifically designed for people who are new to open source.
That's such a good tip. It's a reminder that you don't have to be perfect to contribute. You can start where you are and gradually take on more challenging tasks as your skills grow.
Exactly. And the article provides a code example to illustrate how you could approach contributing to open source projects. Imagine a class called Open Source Contribution. This class would help you find suitable issues to work on, develop solutions, submit your contributions, and handle feedback from the community. It's like a roadmap for navigating the world of open source.
This whole deep dive has been such an eye-opener. I'm realizing that so much of the battle with self-doubt comes down to shifting our mindset, focusing on tangible actions we can take, and building a support system around us. It's not about pretending that imposter syndrome doesn't exist, but about recognizing that we have the power to choose how we respond to it.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's about moving from a place of fear and self-doubt to a place of empowerment and growth.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. It's been a real pleasure exploring this topic with you and unpacking all of these incredible insights. I know you, our listener, are walking away with a lot to think about and some fantastic strategies to try out.
It's been a joy for me as well. Remember, the journey of learning, especially in tech, is a marathon, not a sprint. Be kind to yourself, embrace the challenges, and never stop learning.
Beautifully said. And to you, our listener, thank you so much for tuning in and for sharing the article that sparked this conversation. Remember, you have so much potential and you're capable of achieving amazing things. Keep learning, keep growing, and never be afraid to ask for help. We're all in this together. Until next time, happy coding.